Good morning, everyone. This class has a tendency to run late, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with a prayer real quick. Father God, we love you so much, and we thank you for your presence in our lives. We thank you for the good book and the lessons we learned by studying your word. Pray that today I remember all the good stuff and leave out the less interesting stuff. Help us to get done. We pray all this in your son's name. Amen. All right. Might as well pray to get done because it hadn't happened yet. All right. Today's lesson is an interesting title, and this is going to be a different lesson. For those of you who have been in this class, you're expecting a certain kind of lesson. This is a little bit different just because of the time in his life. But I've titled this one "In Distress, in Debt, and Bitter in Soul," and my verse, it kind of ties it all together somewhat. The crucible is for silver, the furnace is for gold, and the Lord tests hearts, meaning that being tested is somewhat like being melted down in a furnace and have the bad stuff taken out. All right, we're moving right on. We're going to go ahead and do our review this time so that we're caught up. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. When Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. When Saul realized that his daughter Michal loved him, Saul was David's enemy. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. They had a family covenant. Saul tried to kill David by appealing to his pride, but failed. And Michal helped David escape, but lied to Saul that David threatened to kill her. Jonathan spied on Saul for David and helped him escape Saul. All right, that gets us caught up. Now, I'm going to start off this by kind of explaining what we're doing, because it's a little bit different. You may go, what's going on? This is our Behind the Music segment. By reading the Psalms written by David around the time the event occurred in Samuel, you get a unique insight into what was going on in his mind at the time. It reflects on what just happened and influences his next steps. And I think this is really interesting. And basically, we know when some of these Psalms were written, and we know the events in Samuel. But putting them together kind of gives you an idea and helps you figure out what was David thinking, what was going on in his mind. And it's actually pretty cool because you remember Samuel was written by somebody else. David wrote these Psalms himself. So David knows what he was thinking. It came out in songs. And so we're going to kind of go through that in these songs as he goes through. All right, this is going to be my summary section because a lot of this is difficult to read, and I've trimmed it down as much as possible. David gathered some men and went to Nob, where Ahimelech was high priest. And this name here, I'm going to pronounce it in a fun way. Doeg. Doeg, the Edomite, was also there. He was loyal to Saul. David did not want to tell Ahimelech that he was on the run from Saul, so he told him he was on a mission for Saul. David asked for 5 loaves of bread for road provisions. Ahimelech would allow it if they had kept themselves from women. David assured them that they had, and Ahimelech gave him the consecrated bread. He also needed weapons, so he took Goliath's sword that was kept there. The consecrated bread is also called the showbread. Basically, it's part of the regular worship for a grain offering. So it's something kind of looks like pancakes. In case you haven't ever seen it, it's like really thick. Kind of nasty looking pancakes. All right, now for those of you who like maps, today is your day. Enjoy this. You'll get so many maps today. But all right, now we're going to start off. Remember, Saul was from Gibeah. That's in Benjamin, right up here. And they went to Ramah was the first step. That was the whole thing from last week. Now we're going to go down that little tiny thing to Nob, and that's where we are right now. And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. Now, this is a fun part. And the servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of hymn and dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s." And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands and made marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Now pay attention to that spittle running down his beard because I think it has something to do with this next thing. Maybe. It's just in my opinion. Then Achish said to his servant, "Behold, you see the man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" Clearly, the idea David had was, I want to get into the house of the king of Gath. I want to pretend to be a servant because that's a great hiding place. But he was, the other people knew the fame of David. They even thought he was a king because if he was a Philistine, he probably would have been a king because they had plenty of kings in the Philistines. And it got foiled. So David did the best thing, and he did an improv. And he pretended he was crazy. He let the spittle run down his beard. I don't know what kind of marks he made, but that's why I put the little hand mark. I imagine he just got some mud and started painting the walls. So this is a pretty big jump. We go from here all the way down to Gath. So Psalms 34. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. A lot of you may recognize verse 13. They use it as a children's song, keep your lips from evil. But think about what he's saying here. And think about the verbiage. What does it sound like he's doing? I mean, especially when you read line 11. Come, O children, listen to me. What's going in his head? Now, if you're following along in your Bible or happen to read it, the Psalm 34 says Abimelech. But the word Abimelech means my father the king, so it's referring to Achish. Abimelech, the first story of Abimelech in the book of Judges is a horrible thing, but you find out that perhaps Gideon thought of himself as a king because his son called himself Abimelech, son of the king. So let's see what happens next. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. Now, that's the first time you hear about David's brothers from quite a period of time. I suppose they were no longer welcome in the army. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And he became commander over them. There were about 400 men. When I see this, I think a lot about Robin Hood, except sort of the opposite. Robin Hood had his band of merry men. David had his band of bitter men. And one thing that I've been thinking about all week, and I still can't figure out, why did all these people come to David? What did they expect to find? He was on the run. He was on the run from the king. It was not necessarily a great place. I suppose they're so desperate, this looked like a better place to be in. Maybe they thought David was going to be the next king, which was well known. But it's a very interesting thought to think of a man on the run with 400 men who were bitter in soul, who were in debt and in distress. Okay, so we go from Gath, we go all the way down, if I can follow the line, all the way down to the cave of Adullam. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me." And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Now, the stronghold could have several different references. Pretty much whenever he was in a cave, they called that a stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not remain in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah." So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. So we go down. He went from here, basically, all the way to Moab, drops off the folks. And this little red box there is the forest we're referring to. All right. Meanwhile, in Gibeah. Boy, this is going to go really fast. I'm going to get done really early and have to ask questions. Then the king sent to summon Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob. All of them came to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he hath risen against me to lie in wait as at this day? Saul was upset. Then Ahimelech answered the king, And who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law and captain of your bodyguard? Now, notice this is the only time you ever hear the word captain of your bodyguard, which is interesting. I always forget that he was a captain of the bodyguard. He was an armor bearer. He played the lyre. He was a captain of the bodyguard. So he's trying to kill the captain of his bodyguard. And honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant, or all the house of my father. For your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. And the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. Now here Saul has gone over the deep end. We have now seen the culmination of Saul's growing paranoia over trying to protect his family. Here he is threatening the high priest. This is the high priest. Remember, there's only so many high priests because they all have to come in the line of Aaron. So he's saying, You're going to die. And the king said to the guard who stood beside him, Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David. And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king will not put their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. This last line, they would not put their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. I kind of think maybe there is some influence in that when Saul is chasing David, because David gets away for a long time. It's possible that the soldiers that were with Saul were not as fully into killing David. And so perhaps that's one of the reasons why he escaped and survived so long. Whoops. Then the king said to Doeg, You turn and strike down the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep, he put to the sword. So he basically annihilated the whole town, including all 85 priests. And it's interesting because we remember that one of Saul's faults was that when they asked him to destroy Amalek and everything in it, he was unsuccessful. But when he decided to destroy a whole city of priests, everybody there, that's just not just priests, that's just the priests' wives, all innocent people. Everyone was killed because of his crazy obsession with becoming the king. And this is just really one of the darkest moments in this whole story. I mean, far darker than anything else was the depths to which Saul had fallen. So, how do we get from the Saul who saved Jabesh Gilead to this? Well, first of all, you look at 1 Samuel 15:28. This is when he became on the lookout. Then the Lord has torn the kingdom from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. That little last dig, who is better than you, I guarantee you that's what he was thinking about the whole time. Well, who's better than me? I'm pretty good. Remember, he had just built a monument to himself. He was pretty confident. He was pretty secure. He thought, nobody's better than me. What are you talking about? But he bore a deep resentment from this day forward for all the priests. And I think that's why he was able to annihilate the whole city of Nob and all the people that lived there, because I don't think that he had as much faith in God as he should have. I kind of think he thinks that priests are just being rogue agents and telling him stuff that's not true. He thought, hey, I'm going to be a king forever, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to do what I can to stop this from happening. Number 2, target acquired. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s. To me, they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have at the kingdom? This is 1 Samuel chapter 19. He was on the lookout for, say 22 to 25 years. That's a really long time to be on the lookout. I think he was kind of settling down. His anger and his worry about being overthrown. Because, when you're king for 25 years, that's pretty good. But he was still in the back of his mind going, hey, there's somebody who's going to be better than me. And all of a sudden, it clicked. Hey, this guy's better than me. Hold on. He's 10 times better than me. And that's what it was. He's like going, wow, 10 times better than me. That's going to be the guy. There's the guy. Right there. There's the guy. And he is thinking, one of the things I didn't mention here is after the whole thing was over, he had his uncle Abner bring David up before him and say, hey, who are you? He wanted to make sure he had the right guy, because this was the harp player, the lyre player. He played a lyre with a sounding board, not a harp. But I think that was a really big time for him. 25 years of waiting, and whoop, target acquired. One more. Now it's personal. Michal replied to Saul. He said to me, help me get away, or else I will kill you. Michal's response to her dad was that my husband, the reason I let him get away was that he was going to kill me. And remember, Michal is the baby girl, the pretty one, evidently, because nobody really was that interested in Merab. I don't know if she's pretty. It's just in my head. But when that clicked after Goliath, those two things, he put those two things together. He's better than me. My children are betraying me for him. You could take Michal in there. You could also put Jonathan in there, because Jonathan, he called Jonathan all kinds of names there too. But I think it was Michal that got him flipped, because if you read the text, it says that's when he became an enemy of David. So those three things are enough to wipe out a whole city of innocent, peace-loving people that serve the Lord. It's so terrible, because you got a king that's gone all the way over to the dark side, and here he wipes out Israel's only hope of staying on the good side. He's just killed all the priests, every stinking priest that was there. But there is good news. One of the sons of excuse me, let me drink some water. That's so many consonants. The more consonants, the more water you need. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled to David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. Now, if you remember way, way, way back, Eli, he had the two sons, the two wicked sons. And, because Eli had been the high priest when they took out the Lord, the Ark of the Covenant, and they brought it out to win the battle. They did not inquire of the Lord, but they brought it out on their own. That's when the Lord said, hey, I'm going to wipe out your family. But he didn't mean I'm going to wipe out the whole line of high priests, because that's not something the Lord was going to do. But he ended up, a lot of them had unpleasant demise. So the one that survived is Abiathar, because we have to have a high priest. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. So here, David's feeling guilty, because he knew Doeg was there, and he thought, well, Doeg's going to tell Saul. He did not warn Ahimelech in private, and the worst happened. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me, you shall be in safekeeping. So, from that point on, Abiathar and David were good friends, because Abiathar was on the run and had no family left. They were all dead. It's really a sad time. But here you have David, Abiathar, and 400 bitter men. Now, Psalms 52. I'm reading the whole thing here because I love it. This is a great psalm. but it's not one of the ones that you'd want to sing on Sunday morning. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all the words that devour, O deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but he trusted in the abundance of his riches, and sought refuge in his own destruction. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. So, Psalms 34, he's acting like a teacher, because what happens right after when he becomes a teacher? All these bitter men come into his presence, all these people that are in debt. I kind of felt like he was kind of shepherding these people, just like he did when he was shepherding the sheep. He was trying to, making sure everybody was loving God, was on the positive. But then this horrible thing happens, and he just spills his guts out. And it's really one of the great tragedies of all the Bible. Now, they told David, behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are robbing the threshing floors. Therefore, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go and attack these Philistines? One of the coolest things if there's a good thing out of a tragedy, here it is. Abiathar is with David. Now, Abiathar and David are going to be friends. They're going to inquire about every step they make from here on out. Shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go and attack the Philistines and save Keilah. But David's men said to him, behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah and against the armies of the Philistines? And David inquired of the Lord again. And the Lord answered him, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hands. And one thing I thought about on these band of 400 guys, I go, well, these aren't soldiers. But you got to remember, the whole army of Israel, it's a peasant army. They're just, all they are is farmers, but that are tough and want to, stick people with sticks, because they didn't have a blacksmith still. So it's right for them to be afraid. But, when he inquired of the Lord said, go and do it. And so David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines and brought away their livestock and struck them with a great blow. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. So, where were we? Where are we? Well, we were at this little red box, all the way up to Keilah. Now, you'll see there's a lot of loops back and forth. But, this is, and we're not going to go through this whole thing today, because it's not that long of a lesson. Now, it was told Saul that David had come to Keilah, and Saul said, God has given him into my hands. Why would he think that? But anyway, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars. And Saul summoned all the people to war to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. Remember, he saved Keilah with 400 disgruntled people. David knew that Saul was plotting against him, and he said to Abiathar the priest, bring the ephod here. Here we mentioned the word ephod again. We've talked about that. It's just basically an apron. But when you put on an ephod, you mean business. You're not just messing around. It's signifying we are going to go before the Lord in purity of mind and spirit. Then David said, O Lord, the God of Israel, your servant has surely heard that Saul seeks to come down to Keilah, destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hands? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Lord, the God of Israel, please tell your servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. Bad news. So David said, well, will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul? Hoping against hope. And the Lord said, they will surrender you. So we have betrayal, one of the biggest betrayals, the first betrayal. And then David and his men were about 600. They got 200 more somewhere along the way. arose and departed from Keilah. And they went wherever they could go. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he gave up the expedition. And David remained in the strongholds of the wilderness, in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God did not give him into his hand. So they go up here to Keilah, and then he rescues the Keilah from attack, comes back down into the wilderness of Ziph, which really, this is the basic area, but in this little drawing, it's down here. So, how do you think David's feeling at this point? I'll tell you how he's feeling right here. Psalm 63, verse 1. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Suddenly, these songs are not quite as optimistic as they used to be. You can start to feel the wear on David because suddenly, instead of just wonderful optimism or teaching like in Psalm 34, before he got those people to him, now we see some real emotions here. And Jonathan, Saul's son, this is my favorite part of the story. This is the only highlight, so enjoy this part. So Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. I don't know how many times I've taught this lesson, and all of a sudden that popped out to me, and I completely missed it because people kind of forget about it. But it's like, David still had a friend, and his friend was a prince, and he met him at Horesh and say, hey, you're going to be okay. I'm going to, God's going to get us through this thing. Do you think that was important to David? I can guarantee you it was. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. What nice words to say. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, and David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. One thing that David and Jonathan do every time they see each other is they make a new covenant. I mean, they're really good friends, but it's like, hey, let's make sure we keep this going for a long time, because there's no greater comfort David ever has in his whole life than moments like this, especially when he's in the middle of nowhere without any water. I mean, it's one thing to camp out. He's a shepherd. He's used to being in the wilderness, okay? He's not used to not being able to get food. I mean, you have to remember there's not any Quick Trips, any gas stations. So there's not a place you can buy bottled water like I have here. He couldn't talk at all, I'm sure. And he has a friend come and say those words to him, the last guy Saul would ever want saying them to him. And it changes his outlook for a while. Some Ziphites went to Saul, informing him that David was nearby and intending to find out where David was hiding. But remember, Saul's an old man and very practical by this point. This is the only thing I like Saul saying this whole time. Verse 22, go make yet more sure. Know and see the place where his foot is, and who has seen him there, for it is told me that he is very cunning. See therefore and take note of the lurking places where he hides, and comes back to me with sure information. Then I'll go with you. If he is in the land, I will search him out among the thousands of Judah. Even Saul's getting depressed trying to find David, and he's not willing to put out any effort unless he knew exactly where he was. Psalms 54. For strangers have risen against me, ruthless men seek my life. They do not set God before themselves. Behold, God is my helper, the Lord, holder of my life. He'll return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put an end to them. He's referring here to the Ziphites. He's been betrayed by the men of Keilah. He's been betrayed by the Ziphites. And Saul and his men went to seek him, and David lived in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul, I didn't edit that very well. Saul pursued after David. Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men went on the other side of the mountain. David was hurrying to get away from Saul, as Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture them. A messenger came up to Saul saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines made a raid against the land." So Saul returned. Therefore that place was called the Rock of Escape, and David went up from there and lived in the stronghold of En-gedi. The Lord was with him, even though he was almost caught. This was a very interesting point. He had just met with Jonathan. He was on the run. He was almost caught, but his faith in God held true. Psalm 57, verse 1 and 4 and 5. Be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. That's another one we will not sing, I promise you. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Now we'll sing that part, but we will not sing the other part. How do you think David is feeling at this point? Do I need to? It's pretty clear. David is at the end of his rope. David is feeling the pressure. David is not enjoying being on the run, just narrowly escaping. He thinks next time Saul finds me, that's going to be the last time Saul finds me, because that'll be it. I've got all these bitter men around me who for some reason aren't cheering me up. I've got all these people in debt, all these people that are in distress. I'm the leader. I should be the one cheering them up. But at this point, David has kind of lost hope. Now, we're at the stronghold of En-gedi. And, they were in Horish. Now they're in the stronghold of En-gedi. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all of Israel and went to seek David. There was a cave Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. And the men of David said to him, "You shall do to him as it shall seem good to you." Then David arose and stealthily cut off the corner of Saul's robe. There's actually a lot more in there to read if you would like to read the whole thing. It gets a little bit redundant. And afterwards, David's heart struck him because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid it that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed. Put out my hand against him." So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And afterward, David also rose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. One thing about David you can't ever say is that he had his heart in the wrong place. He always had his heart in the right place. Even though Saul wanted him dead more than anybody ever wanted anybody dead, as far as I'm concerned, he still knew he was the Lord's anointed. And here he is bowing to the ground in front of him. This is such a moment for me. It's hard for me to even imagine it. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, David seeks you harm'?" He's thinking of the Ziphites here. The Ziphites are horrible people. I hate the Ziphites, and I've never even met them. But, verse 11, "See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand? For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you. But my hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancient says, out of the wicked comes wickedness. But my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? At this point, you see David is really down in the dumps. If you didn't get it from the psalm, he's saying he's a dead dog in a flea. That's pretty far down the line. May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you, and see to it and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. All of David's strength is coming from the Lord. All of David's strength is coming from the Lord. You can see it every time he says a word. You can see that. But if it wasn't for Jonathan strengthening his hand in the Lord, would that have been on his mind? He was really down as far as he could. But because his friend took the time to strengthen his hand in the Lord, he was able to keep his eyes focused above and not in front of him. Whoa. As soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, he said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted his voice and wept. He said to David, "You're more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good where I have repaid you evil, and you have declared this day how you have dealt with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds an enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now, behold, I know that you shall surely be king, as the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." Finally, Jonathan and Saul are on the same page. Saul's just trying to look out for his family. He's not even worried about the kingship at this particular point. And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Now, wow, I can't believe it. I'm so happy. We're almost done. And time's not up yet. What's going on? All right, here's the lesson part. Psalm 57:4. You know, I may have put I realize I put Psalm 54 up twice, but it's Psalm 57, the one about the lions. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongue are sharp swords. Can anybody think of a New Testament verse that kind of reminds you of that? I can think of one, and here it is. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Now, I know it misses that on a lot of points, but there's still the lion imagery. And the being chased imagery. And I think that's, when I read that verse, it's just the first thing that popped in my head. Murder, betrayal, desperate pleading, and endless pursuit were things that David faced every day on the run. I've never felt exactly like David felt on the run, but the truth is we're always on the run from temptation. And like Peter says, we should always be wary of its presence, but being more aware doesn't make things more easy or any easier. And then we go back to 1 Samuel 23:16, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in the Lord or in God. If we all had a Jonathan in our lives, things would be a lot easier, right? Or maybe it's your calling to be a Jonathan to someone else, to be an encouragement to someone else. Or maybe like the band of bitter men were encouraged by David's faith, you are encouraging or being encouraged. Don't normally do this, but I was in the Southwesterner. There was a really good thing. I thought, well, this kind of goes together with the thing. I just want to read this part in case you haven't read it. But it's a great little article. The first one, Lonely or Connected. Lenneman has a word of encouragement or motivation for us. For introverts, it might be a challenge, but it's a worthwhile one. If you are finding it hard to make friends, you're not crazy. Friendship is challenging in a society like this, even in the church, but the answer is not to lower your expectations and prepare for loneliness. The answer is to confront the challenge directly, reject the isolation and division of our times, and embrace real, meaningful, face-to-face relationships with imperfect people. Isn't that just what we were talking about? I just love this, how it goes together. By God's grace and intentional steps, we can do this. You belong here. Brian says, like so many things in life, it will take our effort to connect in deeper community. Let's keep connecting as family here in Southwest. That's a plan God has for us. To me, that's the lesson. If you want to know what the lesson in all this is stop living life on your own. I mean, I know God's only a prayer away, but so is the person sitting next to you is just right there. And if you have a chance to be Jonathan to someone, then God is asking you to do that, or if you need that help, I hope God finds somebody that can be your Jonathan. But as a church, that's one of the functions. So, we're kind of done on time. Next week, we're going to read 1 Samuel 25. Daniel's still on the run, but, Daniel. Whatever the guy's name is. David. It's my name. I should remember that. All right, David. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the class. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's a little different. I hope you enjoyed the Psalms thing. I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of Psalms. I don't like reading the Psalms too much because I don't like analyzing it. It's a song. Don't analyze it. I never analyze the songs I listen to. To me, just enjoy it. Read it, get some kind of meaning out of it, and go from there. But anyway, thank you so much for your attention, and we'll see you next week.